Good Yontiv, L'chaim. It's the second take for the technology to catch up. As customary by the Rebbe's Farbrengen's Yud-Tes Kislev, we always begin with the Niggin Podav Shalom Nafshi. So let's all together sing it. Hartzik Min Alev Podav Shalom Nafshi. Podav Shalom. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim, Rabbi. Though it's 225 years, Tovkuf Yud-Tes, the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, and ever since it became the Chag HaGeula, Rosh Hashanah Chassidus, Lashon HaTeva, Be'limud HaChassidus, Be'darkei HaChassidus, Tikaseu V'sichasemu. Yet, when you read and sing what we just did, Pod V'Sholem Nafshi Mikrovli, it couldn't be more apt and relevant to our times. You just translate the words of the entire nigun of the entire kapitel. It's all about war. Pod V'Sholem Nafshi, my soul was redeemed in peace, mikrovli, from the battles. The battles. The Alter Rebbe had his battle, and we have our battles today. Mikrov. So, with Eretz Yisrael and the Eden in Eretz Yisrael always in front and center of our minds, in Mishkachei Yerushalayim, every tefillah is toward the east, toward Eretz Yisrael, the center of the universe. Shara Shamayim, as Yaakov Avinu says in last week's parsha, the gate to heaven. So our hearts and souls are with all the Eden there. We're all one. And that it should be Podu V'Sholem Nafshi, Nafshi of all the Eden, as a call and as a prat, and even of Sholem Legamri. And if you read on, I don't know if we're going to analyze every posuk, but you could talk about Anshe Mirma, Anshe Domim, blood, deceit, literally everything going on today in the battles that we're fighting, both on the ground and in the media and propaganda, is all about deceit. And looking at the Lashenis, I mean, just, what can I say? But the conclusion is, Vani Eftach Bach. Like the beginning, Poder V'Sholem Nafshi. We know the Alter Rebbe, why this nigun, why this became the theme of Yud-Tes Kislev, is because the Alter Rebbe said and writes in his letter that Kishis when I began to say Poder V'Sholem, which was then the Shir Shel Yom, when you divide Tehillim by the days, third day of the week, that's when the Psura came that I will be released completely from prison. So of course Alter Rebbe saw the hashgacha of that, and that became the way to capture the essence of what Yud-Tes Kislev is. It's not just the nigun that the Chassidim composed, but also the Maimorim. The large bulk of the Maimorich Chassidus that the Rabbeim delivered in connection with Yud-Tes Kislev begin with the Pasuk Poder V'Sholem Nafshi, especially the Rebbe. So, it's very clear, as we know the story of Yud-Tes Kislev, that it wasn't just an event that happened once or happened with an individual. It was an Inyan Klali. You call something Rosh Hashanah Chassidus, it means it's a Rosh Hashanah, Kipshutei. And you call Chag HaGeula, not just a Chag for then, but it's a Pul Nimsheches, as the Rebbe explains in many of the Sichos. That is something that affects us till this very day. And every year, Yom Me'elim Niskarim V'Nasim, when we celebrate Yud-Tes Kislev, we're getting the keiches that were given that day back in Tovkuf Yud-Tes. So therefore, we have the special Yom Zgula and the Schusim of the Alter Rebbe. And frankly, it was a miracle, because Alter Rebbe was not exactly in a prison where you had due process and justice. Could have easily been Rahman al-Islam, who knows what. So his redemption from there was a miracle. But this miracle is not just a one-time thing. It's Pasach HaTzinah. It opens up the channel. So till this day, the Rebbe says this about other days as well. So we have to believe that even right now, as our holy soldiers are fighting the battles for Klal Yisrael, that the Alter Rebbe's Geula is giving keiches for us to have a total Geula in that part of the world, really in the entire world. And it should be Dafka B'Shalom. So, of course, everyone could ask, the fact is it's already not been B'Shalom. We've already had, unfortunately, deaths, Chmona Litzlan, Hayalesiya, and bloodshed, and atrocities. So we don't know Hashem's mysterious ways. We still go with Ani Eftach Bach, with the total B'Tachin, that we will absolutely prevail. And the Alter Rebbe is a Dugma Chaya. He prevailed. This great Tsarist regime no longer exists today. Alexander and Nicholas and all the other Tsars, they're gone. And the Alter Rebbe remains. Here we are, 7th generation, the Rabbeim that came afterwards until our Rebbe in the 7th day of Shvi, and we are the children, the Chassidim, sitting here. I don't know if there's anyone, the grandchildren of Alexander, Tsar Alexander, that was the Tsar during the time that the Alter Rebbe sat in prison. I don't know if there's anyone that's claiming grandchild, and definitely not Farbrengen. So it's fascinating to see, because here we are, a miyut to b'miyut, atam atma kol ha'amim, and yet we prevail again and again. So if it was a one-time thing, if you're a skeptic, you could say it's a fluke. But this is really our story, 3,800 years, counting from Avram Avinu. And a time and again and again and again. Exactly like we say, Yisrael Daimon Levana, we're compared to the moon. Like the moon. It waxes, it wanes, it almost disappears, actually disappears, just to come, Shemasidin L'Schadish Kamesei, and it's reborn again. Reish Chedesh, a new Chedesh, a new Levana. So it's not something that you need faith for. History is a witness to the Am Yisrael, the Nitzchias of Am Yisrael. At times we take it for granted. I don't think many of us talked about this before Simchas Torah this year. But now it's apparent and very, very clear. And the whole world is seeing it. The Alter Rebbe writes his letter to Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev about the Geula, and that the Eine Kol HaUmes, all the nations saw, the ministers, the Sari HaMalucha, they all saw this miracle that happened in Yud-Tes Kislev. And the Rebbe asked the big question, who cares that they saw? Manaf Kamina. It's a Geula for Chassidus, a Geula for Torah, a Geula for a Tzaddik, a Rebbe. It started a whole new era. Yefutza Secha Chutza, as the Rebbe Rashab explains. So what's the Negeya, what the Umas Elam, that they were expelled from this? Especially in the early Sikhs, the Sikhs in the early Mems, when the Rebbe began to koch strongly about Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Neach, where it was very clear that the Rebbe was moving from Melech Yisrael to Melech HaKol Elam. And the Rebbe's answer was, no, because that's the kavon of Torah and Chassidus. It's not just to reach Eden, it's to reach the whole world. So the Alter Rebbe wasn't saying it's time to demonstrate that it was a big thing, that it was an affected the world, and the goal of Yud-Tes Kislev is not just to affect Eden, but the ganze Welt. I remember when my book Toward Meaningful Life came out, so one of my visits was to London, and Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Olav Shalom, he hosted an event, a very distinguished event. They invited a lot of important people. It was like the launch of the book in the UK. And he spoke and introduced me, but he introduced me with a question. The question he asked was, he said, it's a beautiful book, sure it's going to have a tremendous impact. But I don't see that you speak about the most basic thing of all. There's no mention of Taryag mitzvahs, tefillin, mezuzah, kashrus, the mitzvahim, of course. And we know by the Rebbe, Yiddishkeit wasn't just a ideology. It was mitzvahs. He wasn't trying to be critical. He just wanted, it's like a reviewer of a book has to point out things that. And he says, since I'm going to invite up Rabbi Jacobson, I'd like him to perhaps explain. Okay, that's a good challenge. As you can imagine, it wasn't by accident. It suddenly fell out, and I forgot to mention something that the Rebbe mentioned every minute, mitzvahs. So I responded like this. It's based on this letter of the Alter Rebbe. I said that Rabbi Sachs gave a famous talk at the Shleishim after Gimel Tammuz. A very interesting talk. He says he's going to repay a debt to the Rebbe. He feels he has to repay a chayv. That when he was a student in Jews College in England, and the famous story everyone knows, he was studying philosophy, and part of his research and paper that he was writing was to come to America to interview the Gedalim. And it would be part of his thesis. One of them was the Rebbe. And what happens, as he puts it, instead of him interviewing the Rebbe interviewed him and asked him what's going on campuses and by the university, the school, the students. And he realized that the Rebbe was not just interviewing him, he was empowering him. And that's when the Rebbe told him, instead of becoming a philosopher, which only helps you, why don't you become a rabbi? You could include all the philosophy in helping the community. Okay? And that's indeed what he did. I'm going to go through all the details. And the thesis he ended up writing was actually on Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh. Halachic, a theological overview, and it was like a 90-page thesis. And Rabbi Vogel, 5-inch Vogel, said to him, that since you wrote it, why not send it into the Rebbe? He said the Rebbe's going to read 90 pages. He says, the Rebbe will do what he wants to do. You send it in. From your end, you've sent it in, that's that. So he did it. And the Rebbe did respond. The Rebbe wrote back, if I recall correctly, the language the Rebbe wrote, in Skabel, V'tach, and then the Rebbe, Iker Chosem Min HaSefer. The main thing is missing from the whole thesis. No mention of Tanya Pediklev. It's about Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, and there's no mention of Tanya Pediklev. So he said, I took it, humbly, but I didn't understand what the Rebbe wants. I didn't come to write Alpi Chassidus. I wrote Alpi Nigla, the thesis. And his basic point in his thesis is, one of the things at least, is where do we learn Yisrael, Kol Yisrael, Arevim Zeh B'Zeh from the Teichacha and B'Chakesei. There's a posuk there. So he asked the question, are there no other psukim that demonstrate that Eden are responsible for each other? Dafka, a posuk in the Teichacha, like in a negative tone. And his response was, because Adarab, when do you really see Arevim Zeh B'Zeh? Not in times when it's good. When things are good, it's easy to have Avos Achim. It's when there's challenges, and then everybody runs to save their own skin. And you want to see then whether you're going to also care about another. Anyway, he says his thesis, he thought was a Dover Shalom. The Rebbe didn't just say, Osa Atai, he said, Iker Chosem Min HaSefer, like the Iker is missing. He said now, it's already, what did he say, that was 1970 approximately. Now we're talking about 1994. He's talking about 24 years later. He says, now I finally realize what the Rebbe meant. And here I want to repay the chayv. First of all, not Chaz v'Sholom, he was Maharer after the Achar Rabbi, but he wants to explain why the Rebbe wrote Iker Chosim Nasefer. He finally realizes it. And he realized it because of Gimel Tammuz. He said the following. He always wondered why the Rebbe, and of course all of Chabad, would spend so many resources just to find that Yid Vezvu in some Pina Nedachas in Cambodia, bring him a matzah, or a Chanukah meneda, or a Shalchmonis, or whatever. You know, it makes sense. If you're an organized strategist, you focus where the big bulk of Jews are. Where are most of the Jews? The United States, Israel, England, Australia, France. You know, you focus on the big populations, a lot of assimilation, but to take one, to go run, find somewhere, who knows where. And he said, Yesh Leimer, that the Rebbe felt that after the Holocaust, where Yimach Shemam, the Nazis, pursued every single Jew, obsessively to find the Jew, they would go, God Almighty, they would go with a stethoscope to see if there's someone hiding behind the wall. A stethoscope. Who does such a thing? Their hatred was so deep that they didn't even want to lose one Jew. So Rabbi Sachs said that the Rebbe felt that if we don't pursue every single Jew with more obsession and passion than they do with hate, and we don't do it with more passion, with love, in a way they would have still won something. So it wasn't a numbers game. Just like it wasn't for Yimach Shemam, for our enemies. It wasn't a numbers game. They didn't care that they want every one. And he said, and that I realize now what the Rebbe meant, Iker Chosim Nasefer. Because I wrote that, you learn Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh from the Teichacha, from difficult times when you didn't come together, and you see like today, for example, I'm saying this now, the tremendous Kiddush Hashem, look at the Ava, the Achdus, the tzedakah that's pouring, our feelings, everybody's on edge, everybody's in it. He says, so I explained it that way, he said, but the Rebbe was saying, but how gufa kasha? How? How do you achieve such love? At the end of the day, we're all ein day saying Shabbos. We're different people. We have different opinions. We have different approaches to things. How could you create such a Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh? We know also comes from the word Arevus. Zis means that we're all like one organism. How do you explain that? And that's what the Rebbe said, Iker Chosim Nasefer, because without Tanya Perek Lev, you don't know the answer to that. You just know that you have to have Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, and you have to have a Haftarecha Kamecha, and Ma'adolach Sani L'Chavecha L'Savid. But how? So it's Chosim Nasefer, the main point. How do you do this? His paper just said the fact. Like the Alter Rebbe writes in the Pshar B'Lat Tanya, Eich hu Karev Ma'ed. We know it's Karev Elech Adover Ma'ed, but Eich, how? So that's Perek Lev that says that Nafshe Iker and Gufei Tofel, that when a person focuses on the neshama of someone and themselves, then you come to realize that Kulam Asimes and Avech Lukolona and Miyadei Gdulosan Malosan, because you're not talking Chitzenius Al Tabit Al Merei, you're talking about the Primius, and that's the only place you could have really true, absolute Ava and Achdus. So I know I chazed it b'shem, b'shmei, but so then when he asked me that question about why I wrote the book, not just for Eden, but for the whole world, I said, I want us to take it a step further. I agree with you that the Rebbe went to hunt down every Jew on earth with complete obsession and complete passion, and no Jew would be left behind. Atam tlukru le'echad echad, just like a mother. Doesn't matter how many children she has, every child matters. It's not like, if I have more children, so it's only 1%. No, it doesn't work that way. I remember a journalist came to see my grandmother years ago. I was a little kid, And the journalist, a female journalist, says to my grandmother, "How many children do you have?" She says, 9 children. She says, how Mrs. Lipsker, how can you spread the love to 9 children? You know. So my grandmother said, "Were you ever a mother?" Obviously, she said, "No." You'll be a mother, you'll understand, but I'll explain it to you anyway. You could have one sun in heaven that shines, and the whole sun is reflected in every drop of water on earth. Doesn't matter how many drops there are. This is not a birthday cake. Once you cut it into 9 pieces, you have no more left. This is a qualitative lechad echad. So I said, so Chief Rabbi Sachs, this is what I want to say to you. The Rebbe wanted even more than that. Not just to reach every Jew, but to reach every Goy and every non-Jew on earth and demonstrate v'hisam lizgula v'atam ti li mamlechas kain v'gei kodesh, that this Jewish people that you either were complicit in trying to kill or were silent. Not only have we survived, but we will transform you. Oz epech elam sofa bruda. So I felt that the first book I'm going to write, I'm not just going to write a book for Eden. I'm going to write a book for the entire world to demonstrate that chachmaschem and benaschem le'enei kol ha'amim, what Torah is, that Torah brought morality and justice and charity and every value and every standard and every quality we cherish all comes from Torah. Everything. People don't realize this. You know, the Alter Rebbe, Geula, was 225 years ago. The United States of America was founded 250 years ago. Bisman from the Alter Rebbe, a little before. The United States is the first country that institutionalized the concept of human rights. Something we Jews knew from the beginning of time, that every person is created b'tzelem Elokim. And as such, is sacred. Every person. It took thousands of years for the Goyish world to catch up and realize truths that Avraham Avinu taught. Yishmael, his son, and Esau, his grandson, did not pick it up. And they refused to be Makabel the Torah when they were offered. But the Eden did. And we were a lonely little nation embracing standards that the world rejected. Le Sitzach, Le Sinef, Le Signev. The world rejected until slowly it began to enter. The Rambam writes that for all the flaws of Christianity and Islam, it began liyasher saderech, because it took from total paganism and Avodah Zarah to at least to a somewhat of a more understanding of a one single God. Islam is mamish, according to the Rambam, monotheism. Christianity, shituf, but still shituf is not also necessarily for them, according to the Rambam and other days, etc. So liyasher saderech, which itself, by the way, is a radical statement. At the time of the Rambam, he wasn't living in a free America exactly. He was living in times of wars that were being fought between the Christians and the Muslims and everything going on. But he understood. So no one has to preach to us. You know, we're here for thousands of years. I remember, I think it's going around a clip where the Rebbe says, when Fleisch Menschenfressers, when they were cannibals, eating each other alive, we were standing by Matan Torah and saying, and so on. I'm not saying it to pull rank. Maybe I am saying it to pull rank. But the point is that is the ultimate nitzachon. It's not just going to save the Eden, that we're going to demonstrate that the Goyim will be transformed, and that they will, as the Medrash says, if they knew the brachas that come from Eretz Yisrael and from Beis HaMikdash and from Eden to them, the Medrash says they would surround Eretz Yisrael from anyone, protecting it from anyone, no one should attack it. They just don't know. Those that bless Eden will be blessed. So when you say the Alter Rebbe writes in his letter now, the Einei Kol Ha'amim, you understand, it wasn't just Stamazeh. The Alter Rebbe sensed and understood that what really was the biggest Netzochen of all, not just that Chassidus prevailed, and that Chassidus would continue to grow and spread, and as it did, but that the Goyische Welt recognized it. And many people ask, by Hey Tevis, the Rebbe made such a fuss. It's in the Ha'ara there, the Rebbe writes, this day was established in the federal court. So the same question is asked. Federal court. Why do we care what the federal court has to say? This is an Inyan of Yidden, Torah. Because that's the point. When you see emes maskimat la'atzmei mekol tzad, you see it when it penetrates everything. We know emes can't be emes only in one corner. If it's only emes in Crown Heights or on Kingston Avenue, no. It's not. If it's only emes in Jewish communities, emes means every inch of the earth. It permeated with Mola Odes Deus Hashem Kamayim Liyom Mechasim. So that was what the kavanah of Torah is in Chassidus. At the time of the Alter Rebbe was not ready yet. It didn't have the kelim and the technologies to reach every person. But the seeds were planted. So when we look today, the world today, a wake-up call like we've never seen, and maybe we'll never see again. The Rebbe we'll talk about it later. You talk about Shefer Godel and Tov Shechov Zayin. This, in my opinion, is far even more than that, simply because technology alone, it just reaches everybody. So yes, it's coming through negative things. We all wish, they call it October 7th, we call it Simchas Torah. We wish it never happened. And the losses and the Chmona Litzlan, we're not going to go into all the details. And it's still going on. There are hostages and there's more wars to be fought. But we have to look at the big picture. And the big picture, just like the story of Yud-Tes Kislev and the story of all the Geulas, it always began with a setback. It always began with a helam. Kashayano Esam. But then, Ken Yirbe v'Ken Yifritz. You always have the two sides. Ta'azerim bedima, bedinu yekatzeru. And the deeper the pain, the more powerful we became. That's not because we want the pain, we're not justifying it. Lately, I've been using this line and people like it, so I'm saying it here as well, that Jews are like a tea bag. You don't know how strong they are until you put them into hot water. I plagiarized it from a different context, but so be it. You walked in perfect time. Yeah. We don't want to be in hot water, but if you put us there, that's when you'll see what the Am Yisrael is like. And Yud-Tes Kislev, we could stand proud, Chassidim here, 225 years. You tell me who would have predicted the Alter Rebbe Tsarist Russia, and from Tsarist Russia went into the communist Bolsheviks. I mean, the Helomizvah Stadium that the Eden, our own grandparents went through, no one thought it was possible that we'd ever make it. Frierdiker Rebbe arrested, and all that transpired. That here we could see it stand in Tov Shem Pei Daled. I mean, we need a lot of brachas, and we need a lot of Yeshua's Natzalas. No one's denying that. But you cannot deny that the mere fact that we're sitting here Farbrengen, we're singing Poder Shalom Nafshi, those that remember when we sang it by the Rebbe's Farbrengens, just takes us back to a place that is beyond time and space. And you see nitzchis with your own eyes. You see nitzchis. The job is not done. That's why we're Farbrengen. We have much work to do. But there's nitzchis here. And we are those children, whether we like it or not. We were chosen to be here in this year, in this time, because we have to carry this on. We have to carry that baton in our leg of this marathon. Rahman al-Islam, that a person should not participate in that. The stakes are too high. And especially now, when there's war, we are at war, as well as here. There's the Ruchnisdika part. I speak for myself, and I hope everybody feels the same way. I remember that morning when we all started hearing the news. So for me, someone that had grown up and sat by the Rebbe for years and years, it was very clear. Time to be drafted in an army here. Some have to go fight Kipshute Begashmias, but some have to fight Beruchnis, and the war is a big one. Because for every one of us, there are 8 billion people that don't know exactly what Torah and Chassidus are. So it means each one of us is more than one person. You know, I once calculated, like if you had to reach and divide, let's say, what do you take, 100,000 Lubavitcher Chassidim, and is that the number? I don't know. What does Rezathon say? Huh? You don't know. Doesn't matter. It's not exactly, it's the point that I want to make. And divide 8 billion people into 100,000, let's say. So how much is each one of us responsible for? You understand what's going on? And how many people know? So we have a big achrayus here. And the achrayus is to make sure that the Alter Rebbe's message and Torah and the Limud Achsidus and Darkei Achsidus and Torah Achsidus and Niguni Achsidus perpetuates to the next generation. And the next generation has many of its challenges. People have a lot of questions, are confused. And to know that it lives, it's chai. A chai be'etzem lives on. And that's why we're here. And the world will see what a Id is. It's already beginning to see. But remember, nothing comes automatic. You can have a big wake-up call, but we have to respond. What the Rebbe was crying about back in Tovshel Chav Zayin after the 6-day war was he said, Chayi Bayemahu, you talk of a Shefer Gadol. So we have the Shefer Gadol, that came L'mayla, the Nisim that the Eibishter made. And it created a tremendous surge of Boa Evdim, Eretz Ashur, and Edochem Eretz Mitzrayim, that those that were lost in Ashur, the Rebbe translated Ashur from the word the Aleph, Esher, prosperity, comfort, affluence. I mean, you can get lost there. And the Edochem Eretz Mitzrayim, the downtrodden in the Golos of Mitzrayim, of Meitzer and Gvul and oppression and poverty and so on. So that happened, the Rebbe said. And I was a kid then, but I've read many, it wasn't an exaggeration. America changed, American Jewry changed. The Rebbe saw it as an opportunity for sure for the Gula to come right there and then. But then the Rebbe said, but there's one thing. It has to be the second half of the Pasuk. The Lishtachvis Hashem al Har Kotshi. And now the Rebbe said, that's what we need to do. And the Yud-Tes Kislev, it was Yud-Tes Kislev, Tavshin Chav Ches. A few months since, the war was in Sivan, Tavshin Chav Zayin. And the Rebbe was crying that Leider were not using out the opportunity. Now, you don't usually hear words. The Rebbe never was negative. He wasn't negative then either. But you could see the anguish. And if you really want to understand the Rebbe's aggravation over the years with Shleimus Aretz that would come later in the Lamids and the Mems, you have to understand what happened in Chav Zayin. Because that's when the Rebbe saw literally a lost opportunity, a missed opportunity. And it was like, for the Rebbe, like a b'chil l'deiros. Chaz v'sholom, nothing is ever lost completely. But when you have such an opportunity, the Eibusher sends you out, you talk about Shefer Gadol. Again, it's not my words, the Rebbe's words. He's using a nevuah about the Geula. And the Rebbe said that Tishrei in Tavshel Chav Ches, he said that Maimer B'Yemehu 3 times. And other psukim from Nevuas. It was Geula Dika moment for sure, there's no question about it. But there's something, the Eibishter always wants something from us, whether it's Ezbek Tana. So let us learn from that and not make the same error. And that means that we have to be vigilant. We have to become, if you aren't already, a proactive Jew. You know what a proactive Jew is? Every businessman who owns a business knows what it means being proactive instead of reactive. The Rebbe brings it from the Bach. Why do you say Esig B'Teira, not Lemed HaTeira, not Esig B'Teira. It's your business, Teirosim Noseh. What's the difference? Lemed Teira You could have it be a hired gun. You're hired from 9 to 5, and then you go home. You're not worried about the business, not your business. Isik b'teira means someone's mine. It's my geschäft. And you think about it all the time, maybe too much. And you're always thinking how to make it a little better and so on, because you're not a hired gun. It's your problem. It's not someone else's problem. Mamash, as I was walking here, I got a clip someone sent me. Sounds from the Rebbe's voice from the early years. And the Rebbe tells the story with that he read from Harav Perlov. The name of, was it the Rabbi Michal, the Rebbe says. I always thought it was from the Rashbats. The Rebbe says like this, that there was this, a moshel, that there was this individual, a person who lived in a farm, and he couldn't read, and he received a letter. So what you did was you hired a Melamed who knew how to read. On the Kud, as the Rebbe says, even. And unfortunately, the letter was a pseudo, not a good pseudo, that this farmer's father passed away. Nishva Kenim gedacht, the Rebbe says. I'm chazing mamash what I just heard like half hour ago. And then the Rebbe continues that when the farmer began to hear the letter, he fainted. And the guy reading it, he read on. So the Rebbe said, 1 second, he's the one that's reading it, he understands the letter. The other guy can't read. Why is he fainting and not him? And the Rebbe says in this context, a melend chassidus, es ist nicht kein Amichte von Himmel, was ist nicht in Himmel. Es ist nicht idea, es ist dein Tate. That when you learn chassidus, you have to learn it's me. It doesn't mean somebody else. It doesn't mean in Elam Yisraelim. It means you. It's dein Tate. And that's when you're chalish, when it's your Tate. So we say, Korev Elecha Hadover Me'ed, the whole Tanya Teresh B'Ksav Chassidus, Elecha. Means you. If you don't have that point of departure, then you could learn it all and say, you mean somebody else. Like they say, what's the difference between a rabbi and a rebbe? They say a rabbi can speak to 500 people and everybody thinks he means somebody else. And when a rebbe speaks, he can speak to 5,000 people and everybody feels he's speaking to me. Sometimes you feel that, Because it's like by Matan Teira, Loshen Yochid, Anoich Hashem Alekecha, not Alekeichem, Kabedes Avicha, not Avichem. Even though there were millions of Eden there, everyone felt as the Eibishter was speaking to him personally. It's a very different way of chinuch, if you feel that. It's personal, it's you. The Rebbe said many times, Farbrengen is Yechidus. Either other people listening in, good. That's a Rebbe can accomplish that. So the Chaim to us all, the Chaim to the Rebbe, the Chaim to the Alter Rebbe, gave us Eitzer Nifla, tools and resources to transform ourselves and to transform the world, to transform other Eden, to transform the world. And now is our time. Now is an opportunity that does not come often, historical opportunity. And we must. I don't think it's an option. We must use it. Everyone in our own way. Everyone in our own way. So Yud-Tes Kislev is not just a Nakanah, Yud-Tes Kislev, it's Yud-Tes Kislev that compels us, behooves us to create a real revolution in every possible way. In your only Midat Teir and Kima Mitzvahs, and most importantly in the Hashpah and others. And make sure that Shliach is a Shliach, so it becomes a Pulin Imsheches that can conquer the whole world. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. Yo. Chaim Avrocha. Ambirim. Geht's an Anliegen? Whatever, right? Yeah, I want to make sure. I didn't say anything wrong. No. l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim. We're all fine. There's a very powerful, lesser-known sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe. The date, there's a question mark on the date, but it's Motzei Shabbos Pash Kisisa Tafresh Peiches, where he talks about, the Hanocha, the person who wrote the Hanocha says that Frierdiker Rebbe spoke Bariches about the whole Seder Shtalshlus from the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid, the Alter Rebbe. So clearly there's a lot more than what was written down. But even what's written down is quite fascinating. Actually, some things there are actually a little different than it is in other places. But he says there that the Alter Rebbe was Zeicha by the Tahara of the Magid. So, of course, the Choshev Talmidim was Zeicha to be part of the Tahara. The Tahara itself, what is considered the biggest so-called, I don't even know the word honor is the right word, but Komponim is the Reish, the head of the Rebbe, to do the Tahara of the Meyach, of the Reish. And the Alter Rebbe was Zeicha to that, and it says there for two reasons. One, because he saved the Magid, and second, because he saved the Magid's son, Rabbi Avram HaMalach. And he tells the story there, that when the Magid started teaching Chassidus and expanding it even further than the Baal Shem Tov, so Rav Pinchas Koritzer was a colleague of the Magid, was also a Talmud of his, but he had a different approach, and he had it says a kpeda. He was upset with this, that Chassidus is spreading and can be abused and can be exploited and can be misused, not appreciated. Something precious, if you make it too available, it cheapens it, so to speak. So once he came in to see the Magid, Rav Pinchas, and there he saw a blettel, he saw a page lying on the floor of Chassidus, which of course gave him, justified his position that, you see, people are not appreciating it. He fell on the floor. And the Magid had a lot of agmas nefesh from that, because in a sense, he felt, and also min hashamayim, that's what he says in the Sikha, that there was a kitrug l'mayla also on the Magid's approach to spreading Chassidus. And remember, there's still the Magid, we're not even getting into Chassidus Chabad and how it later spread. But then, he says, the Alter Rebbe saved the Magid by giving the famous mashal of the Ben Chelev, the king's child, that fell ill, and they couldn't find any truth for any way to heal him, until someone suggested that if you take the most precious stone of the king's crown, and you crush it, you take the powder and mix it with water. And the king there, it's a little different than other places. There he says the king first refused. It was only when he saw his child get sicker and realized this is otot, there was no choice, so he finally agreed. And they said to him, "You sure you agree? Remember, his teeth, he's in comatose state, the child. He may not even get the liquid inside his teeth, his clenched teeth. Even one drop," said the king. "If one drop gets in, it's worth it." And then the Magid said to the Alter Rebbe that Tishakeach, because it gave me more life. Basically, it was exerted that the Magid would have passed away then. That's clearly there from the Sikha. As I said, you don't see it in many places, but there it says it. It's Pafresh Peiches. So the Magid, therefore, thanked the Alter Rebbe because he essentially was Melamed Schus, and it was Mevatel the Kitrug L'mayla. Okay. So that was the first Schus. why the Alter Rebbe was zeichet to the Tara of the Reish of the Magid. The second was, they also saved Avram HaMalach, who was known because, why was he called a Malach? Because he was mufshat, he was removed from this world, and Kleis HaNefesh was something that he constantly dabbled in. And it was the Alter Rebbe that gave him the bagel and butter that grounded him. In other words, what he says there is that the Alter Rebbe's role, in contrast to the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, was to integrate Chassidus, not just the Geis Giluim, to internalize it, which is the kavanah. It shouldn't become something that is destructive in great gili, but it has to be Edis and Kalim. And those are the two things that the Alter Rebbe was zeichet for that reason. So look, the Alter Rebbe then comes, and we know that Lefierach, before Peterburg, the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe were Bekitzer. More barichas than the Magid, and definitely more than the Baal Shem Tov. But the Magid was already being criticized by Pinchas Koretzer. Why is he spreading Chassidus, so-called chutzah? And the Alter Rebbe, of course, taking it to the next level. And then the imprisonment and the Chag HaGeula of Yud-Tes Kislev vindicated, as we know the story in Beis Rabbi, that the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid came to visit the Alter Rebbe. And Alter Rebbe said, what should I do? They said, you're going to be freed from here. He said, what should I do then? Should I continue? They said, not only continue, but aid, you should even increase and add in the spreading of Chassidus. And of course, we took after Peterburg, they say the Maimorim before Peterburg, gebrennt, it like burned the world, meaning the Fierach, it still was overwhelming. And after Peterburg began more of Islapshus in Seichel, in the Kalim and Levushim and so on. And in simple English, it means this. You could not explain a Lakus to someone unless they were a big Baal Madrega in the earlier generations. That's why Kabbalah was learned only by individuals. You couldn't explain it. Open up an Eitz Chaim, definitely a Zohar. Yeah, there's some things you can make sense of, but most of it is very cryptic. It's levels. It tells you this dargan, that dargan. So unless you know how to break the code, it's just words. Chassidus comes and suddenly makes it accessible that even the Seichel of a Nefesh Abamis and the Seichel of any Yehudi also can understand it, because there's Mishalim, everything comes down into emotional. So on one hand, that was a big challenge. The big question that's asked is, the Alter Rebbe is teaching Torah and Chassidus, and for that he's imprisoned. You imprison someone who doesn't teach Torah and Chassidus. Suddenly in Shamayim, that's their problem. That there's a Id that's makes an effort to spread Yiddishkeit. But it was more than that. The stakes were very high. Alter Rebbe's teaching had the power to bring the Geula, so you could imagine all the Keches Lumazeh stood up against it. Like, the explanation you give, why couldn't Adam and Chava control themselves a few hours, according to some opinions? The Eitz Hadas was a geffen, was a vine. And it says in Sfarim, Sif Sekei and others, Chassidus brings it, that had they waited a few more hours, they would have made Kiddush on the wine from the Eitz Hadas. So the whole thing was just waiting a few hours. Why couldn't they control themselves? So for most of us, it's not such a big question. Every time we have a taiva, why can't you wait? For some strange reason, that's the whole power of it. It makes you want to do it right now. And that's that. But we're talking about Odom and Chava. They were somewhat tzir kap of Shal Kodesh Baruch Hu. So one of the answers given, I'm not sure who gives it, but that's the answer I guess I heard, or maybe I made it up for all I know. But the scholars here will tell me if there's a source. And that is, you have to remember, Odom and Chava were the only two people on earth. I mean, depending on the day is exactly what hour, but bottom line, they were the two central figures. So the stakes were so high, had they not eaten from Eitz Hadas, you'd have Mashiach and the Geula. So you can imagine that the Nefesh Habamis and the Yetzer Hara in the form of a Nachash realized that. So they didn't have one Yetzer Hara. They had the equivalent of 8 billion Yetzer Haras that we have right now on earth. because that were the only ones. So yes, it was only 3 hours, but now, even one Yetzer Hara, we know how hard it is to resist. Imagine a few billion. Because the stakes were high. So the stakes were high, but the Alter Rebbe continued, and today we have the ability, technology especially, to literally reach every person on this earth, and with a language, and with a methodology that the Rabbeim gave us, especially the Rebbe, explaining things in a very organized, methodical, and logical way that even a simple human intelligence could understand. And that's not a small thing because it's integrating two opposites, Elokus and everything that's antithetical to Elokus. Seichel Anushi. I mean, if you need a proof how human intelligence can go completely off the charts, look at universities today. It's supposed to be the bastion of academia, the place where objectivity should reign, and the completely loss of a moral compass. So yeah, we saw this already in Germany, where scientists and philosophers and musicians and artists, with all their genius, when you don't have a God, and you don't have and you don't have an accountability to something higher than yourself, who knows where it can go. So to take a Seichel Anushi like that and turn that into Seichel Eliki is not a small matter. It's a big thing. You know, it's one thing to tell someone, ignore your Seichel and be Kabbalah Sel and they can do mitzvahs. But to try to convince a Seichel that has self-interest, Chassidus, it says that when you learn Chachmas Chitzenius, it makes you into a bigger yesh. You learn Chachmas Elokus, Teira, makes you more bottle. So I remember I learned it many times, but I always was never really understood it. I mean, it could make you into a bigger yesh, but we know people who learn Torah and they're quite nice yesh as well. And we know people who are scientists who are very humble people. It's mechuyev. You learn mathematics or you learn physics, it has to make you into a yesh. It's depending on the person. Why does Chassidus say that the Chachma itself makes you that? It doesn't say it's up to the person. You know, there was this guy who got up, a big Talmud Chacham, gives his drasha. But like, as we know, there's a Talmud Chacham, and there's also, as much as he's a scholar, his self-respect is also greater than his scholarship, let's put it that way. So he gave a whole pilpul. He brought a Gemara, started asking questions, and then he brought the different various Hashenim and Achrenim and slugged up each one of them. First the Rashba, and then he gave his argument against him, and in a very brilliant fashion. Then, after slugging up all the various different options to explain this sugya, he says now like this: "On ich sag," and I say, and he gives his whole innovative theories. So someone came over to him and said, "Ich sag ich," a very loud ich. You have to add that ich sag. So he said, "It's a beferish Shemaim Chazal, a Mishnah. Kol ha'emer dover b'shem emrei, mevigul leilam." So the ich is telling the dover b'shem emrei. I would add, there's also probably, if you go further, there's also mixer shvache b'fanav, so he only said mixas of his greatness, because you can't say it all. So what's the reason? And yesh lemer, like this. It's not, obviously you can learn Chachma, any Chachma, and be a very humble person. And the opposite, you can learn something of Kedusha and be, the Gemara talks about it, come Samovis, even Torah. But what Chassidus is saying is something very simple, but also very profound. When you learn science, when you learn Chachmas Chitzenius, and we're not talking about shtus, we're not talking about nonsense or talking about real Chachma. What are you learning about? You're learning about existence. So the more you learn, the more existence is Tefes Mokim. So you become a bigger yesh, not necessarily more arrogant. It could be more arrogant, but it's all about the yesh. So the more you understand the yesh, the more you are an extension of it. When you're learning Torah, you're not learning about existence. You're learning about non-existence. You're learning about the ayin, that's mahavad the yesh. You're learning about elokus, that's not a yesh. So therefore, it can't make you bigger. You can personally be a big balgaiva and arrogant about it. But what you're learning is all about that existence is not tefas mokim, it's bottle. It came to me when I was talking to a scientist, different ones that I know, and I said to him, okay, look, we all get back to the same thing. What happened before the Big Bang? After the Big Bang, everybody can explain. They explain all their theories. That the ball of gas, and there was an explosion, and it turned into this, and then that, and then with time. But what about before the Big Bang? Whatever was there, where did it come from? So he's a very honest guy. He says, we don't know that answer. We can give theories, but that goes into the area, he says, of mystery, and maybe even metaphysics. It's possible that God put it there. I'm not going to deny that's not possible. Will someone come up with a different theory? But we don't know. And when he said, we can talk about what we know and how it got from here to there. Basically what we call yesh mi yesh. But not the yesh ma'ayin. Yesh mi yesh. Like the story where the scientist tells God, we don't need you anymore. You can take off. Everything you can do, we can do. So God says, show me. So he takes a clump of earth and goes into the lab, and he's going to show how from this earth you can make things grow. So God says to him, 1 second here, use your own earth, In other words, once you have something, you can make something from it, but you can't make the earth. So that's when it came to me, that's what it means. From the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe, he's the first one that says, when you learn Chochmas Elam, you're learning about the Elam. It's fine. It's good for scientific purpose, good for medicine. We need people like that. You can't develop technologies if you don't understand what makes things tick. As a matter of fact, if you're learning about the ayin that created the yesh, you're not going to create a better cell phone or a better automobile or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, it's about the yesh and the yesh mi yesh and so on and so forth. So what Chassidus puts it is, the Eibishter created yesh ma'ayin, and our job is to make from yesh to ayin. That's why G'dei l'maaseh tzadikim and maaseh shemayim v'oretz, because creation took from ayin alikiya made a yesh, and we take from yesh to ayin, or we take from the ani, the asius ayin, and turn it into ayin. But ayin doesn't mean nothingness; it means beyond the parameters of what we call empirical existence. So we also know the story of when Alter Rebbe was in prison. So the ministers just saw they got a real catch here. A brilliant scholar on so many levels, including Chochmas Hamada as well. And we don't know all the stories. They say a lot happened, that they would come, have different opportunities to talk to this man that they had in prison. We know some of the stories. And one of them, of course, is when the minister came to the Alter Rebbe and asked him to explain Ayeka. Why is Hashem saying, Ayeka, where are you? He didn't know where Adam was after the Chet Tzadas. Adam was hiding. So the Alter Rebbe gave him the answer Rashi gives. And he says, but Rashi says, I know, I want to know what you have to say. And that's when the famous expression where he said, they say the Alter Rebbe stood up, full stature, he was a tall Alter Rebbe, and said to the minister, this is a question that God asks every person. You lived so many years, and he said exact amount of years that this minister was. I don't know if we know that the age. Does it say somewhere the age? Something like 47 or something? I don't know. Huh? Something, yeah. And he said, you lived so many years, and God says to you, Ayeka, where are you? What have you done with your life? What have you accomplished? Have you lived up to your destiny, to your calling? I don't recognize you. And that's what Hashem was saying to Adam. It says in Sforim that a chayra, a wild animal, will not attack a human being, because they see that Tzelem Elokim. That's why Daniel and the Nevarayis and the lion's den, they didn't touch him. They saw the Tzelem Elokim. So of course, then the question is, why do we see animals do attack people? So the answer is because they don't see the Tzelem Elikim, it's concealed. Once Adam ate from the Eitz Hadas, the Tzelem Elikim was somewhat concealed. There was some, we call it dissonance, some disconnect. The Rambam explains Eitz Hadas as he was now Margish Ra, so he became like a, it wasn't just, he knew that there's a thing called Ra as an abstract idea, it became his experience. So once you taste it, it's a whole different story. And as a result, the Rebbe is saying, Ayeka, I don't recognize, the person I created, your calling, your purpose, and so on. So we know that Rebbe and Sichos, and that there wasn't just an answer to the minister, it was to each one of us. That Alter Rebbe was telling us that what Chassidus comes to do is it's a wake-up call. Ayeka, where are you? You could be a person who learns Torah, Kol Hayom Kulei, and you could do all the mitzvahs, and you may not even know what your shlichus in this world is. The Rebbe Rashab says that a chassid has to make a sviva, an avir. Wherever he goes, is to create an atmosphere. But then he adds these words. He says, and if you don't, and if one doesn't do that, he has to wonder why his neshama came to this world. These are strong statements. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, it says in the Medrash, I think that Ayeka is also the words Eicha. Eicha Yoshva Badad. Eicha, alas, that if you don't know where you are, you end up in Eicha. And the kavanah is to turn Eicha into Ayeka. So it's a question that each of us has to be asked. I remember what year it was, but in Farbrengen, where the Rebbe told the story, and B'Zichlal, the Rebbe didn't look around when he spoke by Farbrengen. He used to look straight ahead or a little more to the right. And but this time when the Rebbe said the story, he said, the Alter Rebbe sagt, the Balat, what did he say? He said, Yasid von Teres Chassidus Chabad, sagt to jeden einem, and the Rebbe gave a look around a little, and it was like a pretty intense. It's basically like pointing, it didn't point, but like pointing to each one of us, where do you stand in your life? And the Rebbe said, I eat b'chlal, and b'frat achosid, at least once a day, has to ask himself, Ayeka, where am I standing in fulfilling my mission in this world? And the fact is, we get distracted, and we have plenty of things to do. And many of it is the means, not the end. But at least ask the question. So he asked the question, shalas chacham chetzi tshuva. So in other words, this is a eternal question. Today, after Gimel Tammuz, where Begoli Leini Basel Shalonu, we don't have the Rebbe standing and pointing to you and to me, to each one of us. But that doesn't mean he's not, it just means we don't see it. So in a way, there was more pressure, A lot of Bochrim, I remember a lot of people, everyone knew that one day you're going to have to stand in front of the Rebbe by Yechidus or dollars or whatever situation. So it kept you a little on your toes, at least when you got closer to that state. So today, we have to be the ones that wake ourselves up that way, to have that ayek. I mentioned before the atam tluktu lechad echad, every individual. So everybody knows the year Tavshinun Beis, when the Rebbe Sukkos, after the morning when he gave the lulav and esrig to Rabbi Haralik, Meir Haralik. So usually the Rebbe then would go back into his room or into the sukkah or down to his shul. But here the Rebbe followed him, and the Rebbe stood all day, was it till 3:30, till 4, whenever it was, and watched every individual go by and ben lulav and esrig. And it was somewhat very surreal. Those of us that saw it, I saw it, I went by as well. The Rebbe's eyes, it was like different, it was otherworldly, let's put it that way. I remember after I benched Lulav and Esrig, I went down to 770, and we were waiting till it would finish. And the Rebbe then would come down. They'd daven Shachris, I think it was 3:30, something like that. Huh? Says that. Maybe someone can just put their phone on silent, or you have to. So, and then they daven mincha right afterwards. I remember I came down to 770 to Big Shul, and I don't remember who it was till this day. I can't remember. Someone came over to me and said, "Look in the Ramban, the Reish Parsha Bamidbar." And I looked. So there we know Rashi says, "Loma meina esim b'chol shah." He's talking about minyan. In Bamidbar is called Sefer Apkudim. There's twice there's a minyan in Bamidbar and in Pinchas. And we know there's a sort of minyanim, but nevertheless Rashi calls it Loma meina esim b'chol shah. Why is the Eibush to count the Eden all the time? I mean, there's a Mefarshim ask what means b'chol shah, but regardless, it's more than once. So he says, "Mepnech vivusan," because they're precious to him. Something that's precious, you count. But the Ramban asks, why? Why do you count things that are precious? What does counting have to do with it? And he explains, because when you count something, you have to look at it. So you look at each individual. It's like a parent looks at each child. It's not just counting the numbers. It's the connection that you make with each yachid. That's what the guy showed it to me. Which I remember it stayed with me. Little did we know what would happen that year, later, Chav Zayin Adar. But then we did find out. And we know a cook, the habota, the gaze of a tzaddik is not just a look. The Ragachover talks about when the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu to go up on the mountain to look at Eretz Yisrael. Like, what is that exactly? Moshe was mispal to go into Eretz Yisrael, and not because he wanted to go and to eat mepirya yechel, but he wanted to do mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. So Hashem says, you know what? We'll go up on the mountain. When Moshe was looking for sightseeing, it was like he wanted to see the Eretz Yisrael. So the Ragachover brings, and others also, that the look of a tzaddik is not just seeing; he changes things. That Moshe looking at Eretz Yisrael affected, made it easier for the Eden later to be kavish, to conquer the land. The Rebbe said something similar about the 515 prayers that Moshe said. Why didn't the Eibush to tell him in the beginning? It's not going to help. He waited for him to say Tov Kuf Tezvav Tfilas. Then he tells him, don't be mispal anymore. I mean, why have a tzaddik waste his time? So the answer is because every prayer accomplished something. And Ad Yom Hazeh, Moshe's prayers helped us in many ways, including Eretz Yisrael. And I'm mentioning it b'kavona because of Eretz Yisrael today. So the Rebbe gave keiches with his look, and maybe that look also is like the Rebbe always says, it's a gift, but it's also a nesinus keach, and it's also a bakosha. It's a bakosha of a Yaakov. Where do you stand? So for a chassid, one of the ways it makes it easier to awaken ourselves, you ask yourself, if I was standing in front of the Rebbe now, and he asked me, Ayeka, what would I say? And it's not meant to frighten anyone, it's meant to connect us all. And the Rebbe and Alter Rebbe are all one, as we know that Rabbeim are all one. The Rebbe says in the Sikha, it's Shabbos Pasha Vayetze Tovshin Yud Aleph rather. It was Yud Kislev. And the Rebbe said, I was asked why it says on the Kos Sforim on the Shar, it says Shalshela Sa'ir. Look in all the Sforim, you'll see. It says Shalshela Sa'ir on the top of the page. So the Rebbe says, someone asked me, why don't write Shalshela Samoir? The Rabbeim are a moir, not oir. They're a luminary, they're a source of light. And the Rebbe said, there's no shalshelis in a moyer, it's alts eins. So when we say the Alter Rebbe's chochmah and the Mittler Rebbe's bina, that's in their hispashtus, that's in their gili. It manifests through these different channels. But the etzem is alts einzach. I heard from quite a few people, Tovkuf Ayin Gimel was the Alter Rebbe's yortzeit, was the Chavdal Tevis. Chavdal Tevis Tov Shin Chav Gimel was 150 years. And the Rebbe came down to Farbrengen 1028, because that was the moment that the Alter Rebbe's Histalkus. The Rebbe came down, it was the same kfiyas. And I heard this from quite a few people, that the Rebbe had a different type of look. Not just a different look, also when he spoke, it was like the same voice. I'm not saying in any supernatural ways, but and people felt like the Rebbe was channeling the Alter Rebbe. I don't know if that's the right word again. That it was like an Alter Rebbe experience. As I said, I was around, but I was too young to I don't remember it at all. So there is that inyan. So we stand in Yud-Tes Kislev, talk about the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. It's really all one thing. Each one in its tkufa. Someone told me, hey, you see, the Rebbe is more progressive than the Alter Rebbe, someone said to me. You see, the Alter Rebbe found France to be a problem. And the Rebbe found ways that we could transform France. I mean, besides the nonsense, the shtus of it, and the disrespect, I said, what are you suggesting, that the Rebbe, disagreed with the Alter Rebbe? I said, if the Rebbe lived in the time of the Alter Rebbe, he would have done exactly the same thing. And the Alter Rebbe lived in the time of the Rebbe, he would have done with the Rebbe. It's not some progressive agenda here, because the Rebbe explains why. The Alter Rebbe's times were not yet ready to the birur of Esav, like the Rebbe brings for Yaakov and Esav. And now we are ready. It's all about, it says in Teres Shalom, the Alter Rebbe would have lived in Man Hatanoim, he would have been a Tana. And his Man Amaroim, he would have been an Ameri. He's an Atzmi. I'm saying it only because there's sometimes you hear these I guess, thoughts and theories. It's all one thing. Now, for then, each one in its particular tkufa. And yes, the Eibishter benches each Rebbe in his time with the Chachma, with experience, Panis Lefi Hadar, to address the issues of that particular generation. So, in sum, bottom line is Yud-Tes Kislev is the day Rosh Hashanah Tchilas Masecha, Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. I remember hearing the Rebbe started being Magia Siches. So you can imagine when the Rebbe became Rebbe in Tavshin Yud Aleph, officially Bos Legani, so that the Rebbe was Magia. And then the Bos Legani the next year. But they really wanted, I heard this from Rabbi many times, they wanted the Rebbe to be Magia all the Siches. But it's not Zman Grama, the Rebbe couldn't be Magia them all. Those first two Maimorim, actually, I heard from him once that he wanted no one knew what the Seder would be. It's not like the Rebbe said, I'm going to speak and you're going to write Hanochas. All the Rabbeim, except the Alter Rebbe, I don't know if you know this, wrote all their own Maimorim, mostly. Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya. L'Kutei Teira and L'Kutei Teira, he didn't write, he spoke, except a few pieces here and there. And the Manichim wrote it. There were like 5 Manichim total that we know of. There was the Mariel, the Alter Rebbe's brother. There was the Mittler Rebbe. There was Moshe, another son of the Alter Rebbe. There was Pinchas Rezes, Hanochas Harap. And there was the Tzemach Tzedek in his time. And in some cases, we actually have 5 Hanochas of one Maimer. So you can actually see the different styles. Yeah. But the Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya. All the other Rabbeim, Mittler Rebbe wrote everything. There are also Hanochas, but they wrote, the bulk of it they wrote. Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Marash, Rabbi Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe. So when it came to the Rebbe, they didn't know what it was going to be. So the hope was that the Rebbe would also write his Maimorim. He'd deliver them. That's what the Rabbeim did. They wrote them and they spoke. So when it came to Bos Legani, and then there was right away Hashavas Beganim, the second Maimer. So Rabbi Yael, he was a bocher then, just 20 years old, but he was hoping the Rebbe would write it. So he didn't send it in to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked him, why don't you, where are these Maimorim? So he came up with some kakimeni excuse. I think he said, by Bos Legani, the Inyanim were too, I may get this wrong, I don't remember exactly. The Inyanim were not clear. And by Hashavas Beganim, the Rebbe was crying so much so they couldn't really hear everything. He gave some problemais. Because he said, let the Rebbe write it. Why should I write it? And the Rebbe looked at him and said, he said, "Du bist like he said, du bist etwas getrunken? Something, what's the matter with you? Like what are you talking to me like an imbecile? I don't know what the words he said. I said, du bist etwas getrunken? Also, du say them it did, So obviously he got the message and he wrote them, and the Rebbe was Magia. But as I said, they wanted everything to be Muga, but it didn't happen. Then finally they got an opportunity. This is how the Kutta Sichas was born. How was it born? Because the Rebbe started kochen sich and demanding and asking the Bochrim in Geleit to go to shuls on Shabbos and chazer chassidus. So he had this vad hafotzes dach, vad limudach. What was it called? They couldn't trace him. So there they found an opportunity. They said to the Rebbe, great. So they're going to take a sikha from the Rebbe from last year. Let's say this week is Pasha V'Yeshev. Yeshev from last year. They prepared the Rebbe Magia and the Bochum have what the Chazer. So the Rebbe responded, you have Baruch Hashem Teira Eir and L'Kutei Teira on every Pasha. And just take from there an expert, but you need... So they mistakenly responded the wrong way. They wrote back, they want something from the Rebbe, not from the Alter Rebbe. Not. That you don't say. The Rebbe responded, I don't know exactly the Lashon, but the Teichen was, Mi Yidme, Mi Yishve. You're comparing to Rabbeinu HaGadol. In other words, you're like choosing me over the Alter Rebbe. So that was it. They thought they lost the opportunity. And that was that. But then someone came up with this idea, a brilliant idea. I don't know who it was. I'm not sure, maybe it was David. I know David Raskin was involved, the Rebbe was involved. I'm sorry, Rabbi, others were. Someone came up with this idea. They wrote to the Rebbe, yeah, in a Chanami, the Alter Rebbe's Mamonim, but we want it with the Rebbe's Biyurim. And then the Rebbe was Magiyat. In other words, you have to put it in the right and true context. Not Risterov, it's the same Rebbe, but they want it with the Rebbe's Hasbara. People don't realize the extent, especially now, it's critical, because there's so many interpretations, so to speak, I would say even misinterpretations of the Rebbe's Sichos, and everyone has their opinions, and many people haven't even looked into the Sicha, they have an opinion without even looking into the source, which is itself an interesting phenomenon. Everything has a source, everything. The first thing you see in a Sicha, even before you begin reading it, is how many? 100, 200, 300, 400 footnotes. Everything. We once missed marking that says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. The source everyone knows, Bereshis, Aleph, Aleph. Genesis 1:1. And we missed it for whatever reason. It fell out. And the Rebbe was so upset. There's a whole Sicha, Simchas Teira, Mem Aleph, Shabbos Bereshis, Mem Aleph, in the first Farbrengen, where the Rebbe was screaming, vergessen, as Bereshis Aleph Aleph, the Bereshis from Aleph Aleph is the Bereshis bara Elokim. So it's everything has a source. Why is the Rabbeim and the Rabbeim say Yesh Lemer or Yesh Lemer b'derech hefsher? A Rebbe is allowed to say a pshat in something. You don't find the Gemara Yesh Lemer b'derech hefsher. They say, and then someone can argue, because everything goes back as a shalshelas. There's no such thing as Talmud v'asagos l'chadesh nit l'meisha mesinai. It's a chiddush, absolutely. But the chiddush is like the Rebbe Rashab writes in the Kunta Seitz HaChaim, that there's some people say such chiddushim they weren't even given at Har Sinai. As he says, b'loshen al derech hatzachos. So you say this. I saw in a Maimer in Tofreish Samaches, I think. Yeah, I think Tetzava Maimer. Now the Ayin Ches, you have to remember, is not Tofreish Mem Gimel. Mem Gimel Mem Dal, the Rebbe Rashab writes a lot of Derech Hefsher and Hashem Yer Einei. It was, I guess, out of Bittul. But in Tofreish Ayin Ches, the Rebbe Rashab was already fully established. But yet he brings there, he says, that Chassidus, there's a moshel called, for the Esses Sfiris Agnuzis. So there's a famous moshel of the Shalheves Kshura Begacheles, which is like a white coal. You have a fire within the coal. And then there's the spheres begoli, the spheres agluyas is the revealed fire. Then the Rebbe Rashab says in the parentheses, there's a better moshel, the moshel of shemen. Shemen zayis, so you have olive oil. Before you ignite it, it has the potential to be fuel. So maybe that's a better moshel, because that's the spheres agluyas. We know there's no mitzias of spheres. So in a hot coal, there is the mitzias of fire. You just don't see it. So an even better example would be the oil in an olive. But then he adds this word, Aval mistapina lemer moshel chodesh b'chsidus. I am concerned, or I'm afraid, or I don't want to say a new moshel chsidus, which means miklal lava to shemein, that every moshel that he brings is from the Rebbe. We're not talking about a chassid creating a new moshel. To me, this is all indicator of how you preserve emes. I don't know if you've ever heard the Sikha of Purim Mem Gimel. There's a fascinating Sikha where the Rebbe speaks about himself. You don't have it often. The Rebbe says from time to time, from site to site, there's a doubt whether you're doing the right thing. The Rebbe was talking about himself. Purim Farbrengen. The Rebbe in his style, you don't right away know what he means, but then later he says what he means. That instead of everybody coming to hear one person Farbrengen Purim, why doesn't everybody stay home, Isha Beisei, and learn Anigla, learn Chassidus, and Farbrengen with your family, with friends, and so on? Why is everybody coming to hear one person? Now, nobody in that room, can assure you, had that question. But the Rebbe says he has a suffix, is he doing the right thing? So how do you resolve it? He says, Mefrek dem Rebbe. I think the Rebbe said some lashon like that. And he tells the story of the Alter Rebbe, the Balagula. Alter Rebbe was once in his house, and out the window he sees Chassidim are coming, and he says to the Rebbetzin, "Was willen sie von mir? What do they want from me?" And he's about to go over and close the curtains and lock the door and not let them come in. The Rebbe said these aces. He said, "The Rebbetzin hat gesehen, am Davda Piston, also sein, a good sof. We have to do something to make sure there's a good, happy ending." So she said to the Alter Rebbe, "Sie kommen her, was Eier Rebbe hat zu sagen." Mamish like the story with the Gute Sichas. You want me to explain the Alter Rebbe? That I'll do, but I'm not. She said, "Sie will her, was Eier Rebbe hat zu sagen." And the Alter Rebbe responded, Bazei. If that's the case, I'll say and say. And then he opened the door. It was Pasha Kisove. You have a whole Torah on Kisove. And then the Rebbe continued, and he said, "But the Alter Rebbe does give him mitzad anivus. There's humility. What do they want from me?" And the Rebbe said, "The selbe Rebbe beschreibt, kleimerst, that Tanya is miyusad Mipisofrim, Mipisefrim, as if it's some type of compilation. The Alter Rebbe kind of compile. If you read Mipisofrim, Mipisefrim, means that sounds like someone he cut and paste pieces and stuck it into a book. I'm adding that. The Rebbe didn't say that. So he says, in other words, the same anivers type of thing. Aber hein tafnish ken anivers. Now this is the Rebbe's anivers speaking. Aber bald as gocha protis, da pleni ben pleni had gehert. No, I don't know. Red, green, what it's supposed to be? Huh? Yeah. So he said, it's red. Does that mean that a bad sign? I know that. Thank you. That's it? But that we can't do with humans, right? You can just replace. Anyway, so the Rebbe said, aber bald pleni ben pleni had gehört von sein Rebbe, the far kommunale, basically that was the explanation why everybody's not going to their own place. They come ahead. I remember I was at the Farbrengen, and it was like, why did the Rebbe have to tell us this? It's like, again, no one had this question. And the answer is, in my opinion at least, to understand that this isn't about the greatness of a man, no matter how great he is. It actually is far greater, the bittul of a Rebbe, that he is a channel for that which came before him, with his chidushim, with his additions. That's not so. A Talmud Vosek Osel Chadish Nit L'Meisha Messinai is much greater compliment than when you say Le Nit L'Meisha Messinai. Even though you'd say he may have gotten a Nobel Prize or he'd get you're not paid for originality. What do they say about this guy that wrote a doctorate and he thought he was Mechadish Chvezvos, and then he presented it to the wizards of the world, and they came back unanimously and they said, we all agreed that your paper is both good and original. I'll say he was so impressed, beautiful, beautiful. They said, yeah, but there's one problem. The part that's good is not original, and the part that's original is not good. So it's actually the biggest shvach you could say to someone is that it's, when I read the Pasuk in Chumash, the Omer Kra, it's mamish the pshat in the Pasuk. That's much greater than saying to someone that, you machadish something that's not even beremez in the Pasuk. That's not a shvach. That real wisdom is not how much you innovate. Your real wisdom is be'etzem. It's emes be'etzem. And however, the teacher knows how to, or the Rebbe knows how to convey that emes. And lefi hakelim of the dor. That's why each dor, you have the Rebbe of that generation speaks that language. The Alter Rebbe Chochmah, Mittel Rebbe Bina, the Rebbe Malchus. So when we talk about the Alter Rebbe now, 225 years after Yud-Tes Kislev, and I was saying it before in context of what's going on at Yisrael, Mikrov li Padur Shalom Nafshi, the key is to remember Chol Yem Yeh Beinecha Chadoshim. So we're not talking about the past. Yes, it happened a certain tkufa, a certain year, Tov Kuf Nun Tes and all that. We're happy about things that are happening right now. I mentioned before, the clip I heard earlier, probably from the Yuds, where the Rebbe says, Amalen Chassidus is the Iker, was it meant, wie das negeit zu dir, nicht zu jenem, und nicht, the Rebbe said, nicht kein Brief von Himmel, as the Rebbe's words, nicht kein Brief von Himmel, was negeit zu dir, you. And that changes everything, because number one is that makes you responsible, and also it's personalized. I was in Atlanta for Shabbos, Yud-Tes Kislev. I came back this morning. A lot of Farbrengens there. There's a lot of growing Anash community. When I say Anash, I mean not all Anash are Anshe Shleimenu, but including here as well. I don't mean Tafka there. But it's our term, You're from Anash, right? It's a euphemism. So few people were asking me, how do you personalize Chassidus? How do you personalize it? And my response was, it's not about finding some innovative way of explaining Eidei Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum in a personal fashion. It's knowing that the whole thing was created just for you. Why do you think there's Eidei Sof in the first place? Because the Eibishter needed it. We all know the Eibishter doesn't need the whole Seder Shtalshalos. He doesn't need any of it. He could have said creation, and that's it. Why do you need a Seder Shtalshalos? So Chassidus says it's for us, that it should make sense with the Seichel. We were created. And number two, that we should be able to retrace the steps so we can connect on our terms. So as soon as you know that, then the whole thing is just for us. Now, the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Mem Tes, those Meridike Asis, where he says, Kamayim Apon Leponim, that when you Mizbeinen, that the Eibishter who doesn't need anything, was Mistalik, everything al Atzad, for the Tzimtzum, just for you. Ultimate act of love, that he created space for you. So you should also reciprocate by putting aside all your things and make space for him. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's what he says. So he suddenly takes the Tzimtzum Adishon, which is such a esoteric concept, and so much Chassidus, you could sit hundreds of lifetimes and analyze the Tzimtzum. The Alter Rebbe personalizes it. No, Tzimtzum is simply this. The Eibishter, in his name of love, so make it on a human level. Someone that loves you could have done other things, could have been completely Erein Sof B'Malach Kol HaMetzias, that's Elikuz B'Pshitis, but he chose because he wants you. He wants to spend time with you. He wants you to exist. So reciprocate. That's an emotional thing. And when you look at Chassidus that way, that's what the Rebbe says in that Sikha, everything is that way. You know, we talk about why they didn't teach it to us in yeshiva this way, that I'll leave for the educational analysts. But, okay. But I will say this, that's the way you're supposed to know Chassidus. The Rabbeim did not spend, what do they do most of the time? Calculate the time they spent. They could have, from morning to night, spent with Chassidim, Yechidus, doing counseling or advice or whatever you want to call it. They didn't. They spent most of their time writing, which means also researching, and speaking Chassidus. That means all these Sfarim that we have on these bookshelves was what the Rabbeim felt is the single most important gift they can give you. That means they felt you want something from my love to you? This is my love. This is what I give you. Like the story with the Rebbe Rashab when he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe as a child, and he had this felt longed to kiss him, to hug him. And he was about to do that, and then he decided he wants to make an eternal kiss. Chassidische kush, as he called it. So he wrote a Maimer Chassidus, and when the Frierdiker Rebbe got a little older, he gave him, he said, this is a Chassidische kush. So of course you could ask the question, why didn't he kiss him and also give him the Maimer? Okay, we could be mefalpel. But one thing he wanted to do, didn't want it to be a temporary kiss. You kiss someone, beautiful, and no one minimizes that. But he wanted to make it forever. Now we have a Maimer. Forever, you ever look at this Maimer? You want to know how much the Rebbe loves you? He gave you a Maimer. Without going into names and past scenarios, when different, let's call it fads, started to affect different parts of our community. There's ones now as well. There's always another fad. So I remember hearing from some people saying, I go to these weekends or I do these experiences, I feel loved. I'm being told I love you all the time. I never hear that. I never heard the Rebbe say, I love you. I never heard the Alter Rebbe saying, Tanya, I love you. I never heard a Maimer says, I love you. It's all so cerebral. Of course, you have to go into deep concepts. Sometimes you just need your mother or your father or a friend to tell you, I love you. So I responded to this person. I said, look, to me, the mere fact that, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Perek Mem-Tes, that you exist means that God loves you, because why did he create you? It's true. We need to also hear it. Ahavti eschem Amar Hashem. But the mere fact that the Rabbeim could have been private citizens and just sit on their own, and instead they felt that they want to write and teach Chassidus, is every line is saying, I love you. That's the whole basis of it. So it's true. Some of us may be still children, and we need to hear it. But just know it's coming from that place. But it takes work. Sometimes you do. It's true. The Rebbe did treat us more, expected to be a little more mature, even though there were people that told the Rebbe, I need the Rebbe to be makar of me in front of others. I need it for my ego. There were people who told this to the Rebbe. Some people the Rebbe complied with, and some he didn't. I guess the ones he complied with, he realized they really are real children. The ones he didn't comply with, probably he realized that they can live without it. I saw a note recently where the Rebbe someone writes to the Rebbe why the Rebbe is not answering, why the Rebbe is not, he wants to go into Yechidus and he wants the Rebbe to answer him and all his questions. So the Rebbe wrote to him, because Zman Grom, there's time limitations, so I try to
reserve the time for people who don't really appreciate, and they need me to apply myself. But I expect that people who know what a chassid and a rebbe is wouldn't have to need that so much. So please let me know which category you're in. So the rebbe writes, if you're in the category where you need me to basically, say, babysit you, he doesn't say those words, that idea. Now, I understand not all of us are capable of that. I mean, people ask me very often, how are you able to deal with the Rebbe's sharp critique when he edited Sichos? And trust me, it was sharp at times. It was brutal, actually, to be really candid. But I personally, I loved it. I loved it. To me, it made me better. I saw the Rebbe like a surgeon that was with a scalpel and showing you, every nuance. I learned the power of nuance. I learned the power of to be thorough, not to, everything. It's like a real coach. They don't want you to make even one error. I saw the exact opposite. But I can tell you, I had colleagues. I remember there was a young bacher who was very talented. We wanted him to come into Chazara and work. And he came a few weeks, and he was good. But then once he did something and he was criticized by someone, he said, I don't have, my skin is too thin for this. Okay, that's how it goes. Not everybody is able to, there's rach, levov. And what does it say? If somebody doesn't have the heart for it, they tell you go home and don't join the army. God bless him. I never criticized him, but I remember, so you had to have some self-confidence, and then it's built up. So I found it actually the opposite. I found it to be the greatest act of love, that the Rebbe is not using his gloves and any of this. He just says it the way it is, and you get the mavils that you get. Mavil was one of the favorite words that Rabbi used when something was shocking. Mavil means, bahal, shocking. And a mavil, I've mentioned too many times, sometimes came with one underline, two underlines, three underlines, 4, 5, 7 probably, that I remember. And it doesn't stop there. The Rebbe, for effect, added a few exclamation points and a few question marks. So I don't know what, breaking the record, I don't remember who got it the most, but there was definitely one mavil that had at least 7 underlines and like 4 exclamation points and 4 question marks, not in question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. And it wasn't always, if you looked at it, you wouldn't realize what's so disturbing here. But the Rebbe, again, someone that is, a brilliant mind, sees every kesem. They see like a revav al beged Talmid Chacham. To most of us, what's the big thing? A piece of dust on your finger. But a piece of dust on your eyeball, is very sensitive. So the Rebbe would catch these things. It was actually amazing to see. Things like, I'll give you one example. The Rebbe once, I think this is maybe Vayeshev, actually this week maybe, Vayeshev Mem Zayin, it was. And the Rebbe said, a story with Rabbi Nachum Shnobler, that when you have 2 voices inside you, and how do you know which one's the right one? So you have to do often the thing that you don't want to do. Because the resistance is telling you that that's the most important thing to do. I mean, it's not always a rule completely, sometimes it's not that way, but that's sometimes a sign. Like that which you don't want to do means that's what the Yetzirah. So we wrote up the story, and what? Beautiful story. It was part of the Sikha. And the Rebbe circled it, or on the side, on the margin, writes, Mavil. Mavil, that we missed a Maimer Chazal Mefurish. In other words, now the Rebbe didn't mention a Maimer Chazal. It's not like we forgot it. But like when you're writing the Sikha and you have to make a footnote or something, there's a Maimer Chazal Mefurish that says this. I would challenge anyone here to tell me what that Maimer Chazal is. But the Rebbe's expectations were that we would know it. It's so obvious. And the Rebbe wrote out what the Maimer Chazal was. So we know what it is, and it's in the Sikha now. So the Rebbe brings halacha that says, Oye v'seina seina kedim. By the Rebbe, that's a beferish raya, that something you don't like comes before the thing that you like. And that's a proof to Rabbi Nachum Tzernobler's mice. Now, after you hear it, it's gewaldig. But so I didn't look at it like, what does he want from us? We're not a Talmid Chacham like the Rebbe. But the Rebbe wanted that from us. That's like, so when you love someone, you demand more from them. When people say, who do you not demand from? So when you have Rahmanas on, someone that's, God forbid, handicapped, or they're not capable. It would be achzorius to expect them to do something. But someone that's capable, it has to be request and love. I'm not talking about with someone doing something with cruelty. But to expect something from someone, that's the sign of that you're really capable of being. As some say, I'm not sure who coined it, that the Rebbe saw people not for who they are, but what they're capable of being, which opens up a whole thing. It's one thing, okay, we're satisfied with who you are, but if you're able to see in someone what they're capable of being, those are the people that you meet in life. They can help, on Tfiklin they say, I'll help you actualize yourself. They see what you're capable of. You hear stories of people who became big leaders, business leaders. It all came from a break because someone saw them when they were 16 or 25, whatever. They saw this person has something, and they gave him a break. That means you see what a person's capable of. I know it's Kislev Farbrengen, but I'll just share because it's l'chvivusa de milsa. Henry Kissinger just passed away, right? Olav Shalom, 100 years old. So I'm not here to talk about him per se, but I remember reading in his memoirs, interesting, that when President Nixon resigned from office in Watergate, 1973, so he was in his office before the resignation. So it was a big, once in history, a president of the United States is resigning. So Nixon said to Kissinger, he says, Henry, do you ever pray? He said, no. He says, but come pray with me. And they got down on their knees and they prayed. Afterwards, they got up. And Kissinger writes that Nixon was making his way to the Oval Office to sign the resignation. He's walking very slowly, it's like a momentous moment. And he stops in the hallway. There's a big portrait in the White House of John F. Kennedy, JFK. It's a famous portrait where he's sitting in a certain meditative pose. Like his head is in his like his chin is in his hands. And Nixon whispers, and Kissinger says he overheard. Nixon said he's talking to the portrait. He says, they love you. They loved you because you remind them of who they want to be. They hate me because I remind them of who they are. I thought it's a pretty good line. So there are people that look at, they remind you who you are. And there are people who remind you of what you want to be. Again, it's lahavdil. I don't want to use that as the emotional, but it's an expression. The Rebbe looked at people, what they can be, what your potential is. You talk about a diamond in the rough. You don't see it. And that's why the Rebbe saw this in everyone. That's why everyone talks about the same point. The Rebbe looked at me, you feel that confidence, you feel that. I remember it was right after Gimel Tammuz, Nundalit, so it was Hey Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz was Sunday, Hey Tammuz was Tuesday. So that Tuesday night, I was interviewed by two television shows. One was Larry King, CNN, and one was Charlie Rose. And I remember Charlie Rose asked me this. I was with Charlie Rose. I was with Goldman. What was his name? Ari Goldman. Worked for the New York Times. Now he's a professor in Columbia, I think. But anyway, so I remember he says to me, it was live, so there's no time for preparing. And he leaned into me, he said to me, so listen, you sat at the feet of this great man. He was a very good interviewer. He did his research, he asked good questions. You sat at the feet of this great man. Tell us, what did it feel like? What do you say? What would you say? What did it feel like in the presence of the Rebbe? So what came to me, this was, reflexive reaction. I said, when you sat in the presence of the Rebbe, you felt that there's no such thing as impossible, and that you have a responsibility to live up to your greatest potential and do something with your life. And I remember he responded, he said, really, wow, I wish I had a person like that in my life. And many people say they see the Rebbe's charisma, his blue eyes, his compelling presence, and so on. But that's how it felt. At least I speak for myself. Everybody has their own experience, But what it tells you is this doesn't go away just because Gimel Tammuz 30 years ago and Yud-Tes Kislev 225 years ago. These are nitzchizdike things. When you learn Torah, especially through Chassidus, that's the empowerment. It's empowering your soul to come alive, to be ignited, and to sing your song and have the courage to be yourself, and not just look at others and say, what are they going to say or not say? That's what it comes down to. That's what a leader is. And that's what is expected of us. And anything less would be an embarrassment to the Rebbe. Because what kind of students did he bring up? The Rebbe once said in the Farbrengen, was wollen Sie sagen? Das sind meine Talmidim. They can't answer a question. That doesn't reflect on us, it reflects on our teacher. So l'chaim, ayeka, ask yourself, ayeka, where you stand. As I said before, this is a historical time. I'm sure the Rebbe is watching very closely, and we're going to have to answer. So, l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. So we just sang the Hadaras V'Amunah. It brings to mind the classic Sich in Farbrengen, Vayeshev, Shabbos Pasha Vayeshev, Tov Shinun Beis. And it's very relevant to our time, so it's worthwhile looking into this a bit more. So a little background. In Tov Shin Lamed Daled, the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago, so that's Simchas Torah by Kofis, the Rebbe taught Hadaras V'Amunah with the song of the French anthem, the Marseillaise. I remember it quite vividly. I was 17 years old then. It was by the third Akof, I think. The Rebbe came out, and the Rebbe stood up on the bim on the right. Mizrach Adorim. But there were tables, so the Rebbe walked out on the table like a good 20 feet, and he began to sing. And we were listening, and nobody really could pick up the tune. We knew the words of Hadaras V'Amunah were clear, but no one picked up the tune until, I remember to the right, I was like down on the floor, and I was looking at the Rebbe to the right of me, like more or less like behind where the Rebbe sat by Farbrengen. There was a bunch of Frenchies who would come as guests, and then they're the first ones that picked it up. Remember, the Rebbe was singing it, but he was singing it like Ha'id sings it, not like the French sing it. You know, it was Hadaras V'Amunah l'chai, and it was slow. It was not. And then when they picked it up, they started singing, and it became as a Levidik and Freilich, and the Rebbe went all the way through till the end. And that was that. There was no explanation. And that became a song. Started singing it by different Farbrengens. In Tov Shin Lamed Hey, the next year, by Simchas Torah before Akofis, there was a Farbrengen. There was always a Farbrengen, and the Rebbe said to sing it with the whole song. You know, Hadaras V'Amunah is only half of it. There's a whole like prelude, intro, and they sang the whole thing. It goes like this. It goes so Hadaras V'Amunah, then it goes. And then goes. So they sang the whole thing. It was the only time the whole niggin, the whole song was sung. Yeah, we found out then who knows these songs. Now, okay, so this became part of Chabad Nigunim now, and that was that. Years later, talking about now, Tov Shin Nun Beis. This would be the last Leisato, the Rebbe speaking. Vayeshev Tov Shin Nun Beis. The Rebbe goes back to Tov Shin Lamed Daled. What are we talking now? We're talking almost Mem Daled, 18 years later. And the Rebbe says, he talks about the parsha we read yesterday, that Chassidus says that when Yaakov met Esav, or when Yaakov sent shluchim to see what Esav was happening, Yaakov choshav she'esav kvar nizbarer. That's the language in Teres Chaim. He thought that Esav was ready, and they were ready to go to the Gula. But then he saw that he's going with Arba Meis Ish, and he realized it's not ready. And then when Esav says to him after the Vayishakeu and after the hugging and embracing, so now come live side by side with me. So he says, you go ahead, Visnalo li'iti, Adasher Oveil Adeni Seira, because the tzayin rakis, the tzayin, the sheep are tender, the children are young. And Rashi says, what does that mean? What's he telling him? You go, is he actually going to come? So Rashi says, yeah, when Mashiach comes, V'hoisel Hashem amlucha. It's all in last week's parsha. So the Rebbe said then, that's what happened also when the Alter Rebbe in Tov Kufayin Gimel, it was the last year, Tachav Dalet Tevis, of course, this talks of the Alter Rebbe. Why was he instalik Begashmias? Because he was running from Napoleon. And that's why he ended up in Kfar Piena. He was running. We know where Napoleon's, if anyone ever went, you go there to the city, what's the city there? He's at the city out there. No, not Hadid. I'll come to me in a minute. In what's the closest town to Lubavitch before you get to Smolensk? Yeah. So Smolensk is actually a place there where I remember when I was there, the Shliach showed me that's where they know the Alter Rebbe hid. Napoleon's forces were coming. So we know there was a big thing with Napoleon, was a klipa of the time. And the war, the Franco-Russo War, the question was, who should win this war? So there were Gdei Yisrael that felt it would be better for Jews, France, because the freedoms that they offered. The Alter Rebbe, no. That even though Begashmis would be much harder under Alexander of Russia, but Beruchnis would be better. So the famous story, that Rosh Hashanah, al Medina's Bey Omer, that's when the destiny of nations are determined. So the Alter Rebbe got up early. Pi Aloch, Al Pi Din, you can blow shofar as soon as Aleis HaShachar. Made a minyan. They blew shofar. By the time the other Gadol came to shofar, he already sensed, and he said, the Litvak Atarez Gechabt. The Alter Rebbe already prevailed and already determined who is going to win the war. And that's what happened. Napoleon got stuck in the Russian winter near Moscow, and he couldn't make it. Mamash, what happened? Yimach Shemay to Hitler, the same thing to the Germans later. Okay. So the Rebbe, there's a letter the Alter Rebbe writes to who did he write the letter? The letter to, what was the name of the Chassid? He went to spy. Moshe Meislish, yeah, right. So he wrote a letter to him explaining why he was against Napoleon. He uses the word Bonaparte in the letter. He calls him Bonaparte. And then the Mittler Rebbe has even a longer letter. Basically, bottom line is he was godless. He was promising freedom, but without a God, and that would be, the Eden were not ready for that. Basically, it would be too big of an aside. He was godless. In other words, it's like better to have an oppressive government that is even anti-Semitic, but at least they have a God. The Baal Shem Tov, for example, a wagon driver that didn't crucify himself, he wouldn't want to go with. By him, it was better a religious Christian than Apocrates. Okay, fine. Then the Rebbe said, that was then. Just like Yaakov. He's not ready to meet Edom yet, because the children are young and they're not ready to do the birur. But 7 generations later now we have the power to go into Tzarfas, and now we can be mahapechet. And that's when the Rebbe said, and that's what Chassidim did. And Tov Shalom Daled, they took the niggin of the Klippa of France, the France that Alter Rebbe was menaged to, and turned it into Haderes Ramuna L'chai Elomim, to the Eibishter. And the Rebbe continued afterwards saying, and Ad Kedei Kach, that Ataka had effect, that the anthem was changed afterwards. That after the Chassidim changed it, transformed the niggin, they changed some tenuas and some of the words. The niggin in French is very aggressive. I remember reading a translation at the time. It's very, very bloody, very it's close to war. It's an aggressive song. They changed some of the movements in the song to make it a little less violent, and also some of the stanzas, some of the wording, lyrics, I guess. Okay, that was the Nakud of it. The Rebbe he explained that the Shver Geschikt Shluchim in Sarfas, he was clearly referring to himself and the Rebbetzin. There's a horror there about that. Okay, when we prepared the Sikha, so the Rebbe always insisted that we research everything. Even though the Rebbe said it, we wrote it up that way. So I called up Shmuel Zimov in France, and I said, can you check about this anthem What happened with the anthem? The Rebbe is saying that after Lamadal, at some point they changed the anthem. I was in Chaz v'Shalom questioning, just wanted to know the facts, so you write it accurately. And we got over our head when we didn't do this, so it was like we knew we had to. So the next thing I know, the next day or next whatever, I get a bunch of faxes from him, French clippings from French newspapers that are all talking about the change, that they did indeed make a change. However, after the next president of France came to power, they changed it back. Because there was always the argument, the changes, and then some say change it. So they changed it back. So I took all these clippings, and I wrote up like a skidda, like an overview of what's going on, what happened. And I wrote to the Rebbe, how should we write it? There was a change, then it was changed back. So the Rebbe wrote to write exactly what happened, that it was changed, and that it was changed back. And then the Rebbe wrote to me on the side, not to print. He wrote, in other words, it's not over yet. The story is not over. Basically, our Inyan is not to be sitting and reading newspapers. He sent in clips from the newspapers. That's what he said. Our job is not to go look for, new news developments. I have to say, I'm always keeping my eyes open when there'll be a change again, because the Rebbe said there'll be a change. My point, however, I want to go back is the Alter Rebbe was Menaged. That's why we know Napoleon's March. It's called Napoleon's March. Napoleon was who the Alter Rebbe was against, but he turned his march into a march of Netzachim. We sing it at the end of Yom Kippur, which is similar to the same idea of the Marseille, of the Haderes Vamunah. So, bottom line is, this is the only time ever the Rebbe said something that changed from the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe, Bechlal, Yemamshich, what came before, but the Rebbe said that Alter Rebbe's time was like Yaakov. Esav was not yet in his bada, and now Esav is in his bada. That's clear. That's like a klal de burim in that sikha, which tells you a lot. It means that you can come now into the world, a Western world that may be godless, an academia that's godless, and we have the power now to do something about it. Back in the time of the Alter Rebbe, we had to be careful. It was maybe the klipa was too strong, or we were too weak. But now that we can do that. So I say it also in context, there's a milchama going on right now in Eretz Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe gave a Nesinas Keach to fight against Esav. And there's Esav and there's Yishmael. Chassidus talks about there's Bnei Yishmael, Bnei Esav. And then, of course, there's Esav and Yishmael, Kilo Seir v'Chesnei, that Yishmael, Esav married Yishmael's daughter. So it gets the gene pool gets a little complex. And I'll just share with you that Farbrengen writes an interesting thing. So we know the Farbrengen writes that he lived in the time of the Spanish expulsion. So he lived under Muslims, but he also lived under Christians, because there was the wars going on then. Remember, in 1492, the Christians controlled Spain. Before that, the Muslims controlled. So the Farbrengen has a whole commentary on Daniel and other places where he talks about that it's all Bnei Yishmael, Bnei Esav in the time of Avram. Very relevant to our times as well. So the Farbrengen says something, he quotes an interesting medrash. He says like this. It says in the Parsha, the end of Ateldus, that Yitzchak and Rivka send Yaakov to go find a shidduch in Beis, in Choran. And when Yishmael hears that, when Esav hears that, he also goes and finds a Caliph also. Her name is Basmas, daughter of Yishmael. Also comes from Yitzchak, from Avram. Yishmael ben Avram. So, okay, fine. So Medrash says like this, that came the day of the chuppah, chasana, between Yishmael and the daughter of, Esav and the daughter of Yishmael. So the father and the chassan and his prospective father-in-law sit and negotiate, nodding. Did you guys do that with your father-in-law, Rabbi Kugel? Huh? Okay, good. Anyway, but Esav and Yishmael are business people, and they start negotiating, And this is what the Medrash says. This is like, I'm telling you, it's actually quite hilarious. So Esav is very shrewd. He says to Yishmael that you should go ahead and kill your brother Yitzchak. I'll kill my brother Yaakov, and the two of us will be left with the Ashiras, the Hein Ashir of Avram. Avram was, of course, like a billionaire, or whatever. Brilliant, right? So the Medrash says that Yishmael responds to Esav, Haloi Kain anechi. You think I'm like Kain? I'm going to kill my brother. And I know it's the next step. You're the Talmud Chacham. Then I'll be, you'll have a mitzvah of Goel Adam to avenge your father, because I killed your father, Yitzchak. And then you'll kill me. And the same cheshbon. Now you'll be left with the money alone. No, that's what it says in Medrash. It's a Medrash. In Kasher brings it in Teir Shleim. It's not a conventional Medrash, but it's a Medrash that Farbrengen quotes it. So Esav said, if that's the case, I'm not marrying her. We don't have an arrangement. I'm out of here. So the Kala, I guess, was left crying under the chuppah. And that was that. And Esav took off. But after Yishmael dies, that's when he goes back, and that's why she's called later Machlas. That's another name, because he does marry her at the end. So Farbrengen writes that it's bad enough the tzaddis we have from Bnei Yishmael, and it's bad enough the tzaddis we have from Bnei Esav. But once they marry with each other, that becomes a major mess. I remember when I first found it, I found it after 9/11. So I said the biggest problem is when America needs the oil of, when Esav needs Yishmael and they're like in business together. That's when the real mess is, because then everybody's got, like right now, who's at what agenda, who's who, everybody has their thing. So the Farbrengen says the biggest problem is when Esav and Yishmael, they're married. That marriage causes, because you can't divide and conquer, because now they're intermarried, Anyway, so I guess Beremez, all this is part of the story of Yud-Tes Kislev, because the Alter Rebbe's wanted, obviously, to bring Elokus into the Welt, and there was still Birurim to be done, and then the Rebbe tells us the Birurim are done, and we cannot transform the whole world. There's no longer that Hagbola. Alter Rebbe had an issue with France. Today you can go into France, and the Rebbe says France is Tzarfas Ufaratzta, Gemati 770, you could transform it into Kedusha. And indeed, you see in France, it was one of the major, explosion of Bali Tshuva in France, maybe more than anywhere. And that's how the Rebbe transformed it. And all this goes back to the Keiches of Yud-Tes Kislev. I chazed this already a few times, but maybe it's kedai to share. I found a note from the Rebbe that was written to Rabbi Greenglass, Zev Greenglass, Makubal. It's around Tov Mem, based on my seeing the Rebbe's handwriting. And Rabbi Greenglass saw in a Maimer, Matzazu Tov Resh Mem. It's a Maimer from the Rebbe Marash, and he writes like this: Avram Hispal al Bnei Yishmael Lu Yichya Yishmael Lefonecha. Means that Yishmael should inherit him and should perpetuate Avram. Then Reb Marash writes, Af sheyoda Avram es muhusei. Even though he knew the muhus of Yishmael, v'yoda mashe yase Yishmael ba'achris hayom. Nevertheless, he's still mispal. So Rabbi Greenglass is writing to the Rebbe, what's ba'achris hayom? What is Yishmael going to do ba'achris hayom? And Rabbi Greenglass himself suggests that maybe it means Zeyar Sev Pasha Ve'era. I'll tell you what it says there in a minute. The Rebbe adds, Zeyar Sev Pasha Balak, Upiyut Yisrael Nesha Kilo Seir V'chesnei Ve'oid. Now we know the rule, the Rebbe's Ve'oid means there's a lot more here. You don't write Ve'oid unless there's it's a sugya. What does it say in Zeyar Sev Pasha Ve'era? It says like this, that the Sar of Yishmael comes to the Eibishter. I mean, you're not going to believe this. It's Mamish Ofen and Nevuah. And says to Hashem, not just Yitzchak, Yishmael is also Ben Avram, Yishmael is also nimel. He's also circumcised. So he deserves schar. So the Eibishter answers, you're right. But since he's not V'hoya Tomim, it wasn't a bris Shmeina Yomim, it was a bris, he was 13, Shleishes Rishona, so I'll give him schar, but it'll be a limited schar. And what will be the schar? I'll give Yishmael control over Eretz Yisrael for a certain period of time. That's what the Zohar says. And then when it's over, they will lose control, and then wars will start. Yishmael will attack Esav, and there'll be wars, and the Eden will be in between. You can look it up. Look up Zohar Seif Pasha Ve'era, the last page. And then it says the wars will take its toll. And the end of the story will be Yisrael, I think Yisrael Esechel, it says, or I forgot the Lashon, that then the Eden will prevail, Mashiach will come. It's a little similar to the Yalkut Shmeini. What does it say in Seif Pasha Bolog that the Rebbe added? Similar. Talks about these wars. There he actually says that towers will fall. Some people were merames on the Twin Towers, but there it says Migdalim, there'll be... And Yisrael Nesha, the Piyut, which, by the way, is the day after 9/11. 9/11 was Monday morning. This was the third day of Slichas. We say, Kilo Seir V'Chesne means, Seir refers to Esav. Chesne is his father-in-law. He married his daughter. And Kilo means that they will be eliminated. And that's our prayer. And the Rebbe says, V'Eid. So what you see here, there's like, it wasn't always spoken openly, but it's clearly a whole story behind the story of the events today are very clearly foreseen in all these. That doesn't necessarily give us a nechama. We'd rather have Shalom and Mashiach should be here already. But it does help a bit see the hidden choreography of the Eibishter here. And when the Rebbe brings the Yalkut Shmeini in Tov Nun Aleph, which essentially is that a melech from Paras, a Persian king, will attack an Arab king, and then the world will get all shaken up. What's going to be, and then the Eden going to run around. They'll all be confused, and the Eibishter will say, "Bonei al tisyaru, my children, don't be afraid. Kol masha asisi asisi b'shvilchem. Higia zman gulaschem." So I know you know the Hishtalshus that Yosef Yitzchak Kazen, Alav Shalom, had found that medrash and he hung it up on the wall in 770. And when the Rebbe went out of shul, he stopped and looked at it for a little while. And when he went up to the room, he said that they should add the next kata in Yalkut Shmeini, which talks about Mashiach Emed al Gag Beis Hamikdash, and announces that he gives Mangol Aschem. And then the Rebbe started quoting it in Farbrengen many times. But it's part of the story. We don't go stop looking for midrashim to fit things in. But a Rebbe knows the story. And when you start looking, you start seeing that this is a big sugya in a lot of the commentaries on Daniel, commentaries even on Bris Ben Absarim, how the Ovis were shown the generations to come. And it's very clear that the last Birunim will be Bir Yishmael and Bir Esav. Since we're already on the topic, share one other thing. In Yud-Tes, which was right after 1948, the Frierdiker Rebbe has Hamshach Maimorim and Pesach Maimorim, and there he says that talks Barichis that the Bir of Yishmael and Esav is the last Birurim. It's a Maimer from Tofrei Samaches, from the Rebbe Rashab, which was when the Ottoman Empire collapsed. Now we know that the Rabbeim, when they said Maimorim, sometimes it was connected to events. So I'll go a step further. The reason I discovered it is because when the Lebanese war started in the early Mems, and then Tefadas, the Rebbe's chazed this nekuda in the Maimorim as well. So it looks like something was happening in the world. In Teira, you're Esek B'Teira Se'ela, that the Rabbeim clearly spoke about these things. But it was Beremes. It wasn't like Boilet. But when you start seeing, you see the Zettel with Rabbi Greenglass, the Marash. I couldn't find anything in Tofresh Mem. That I can't find. That maybe something happened in 1880. But this is interesting. I'm not here to just to sensationalize it. But I think when you go back to the story of the Alter Rebbe and Yud-Tes Kislev, it gives context to the fact that Alter Rebbe wrote to Lev Yitzchak Bardishever that Yud-Tes Kislev came to that the Eine Kol Ha'amim and the Eine Kol Sori HaMelucha, that it's not just to show, not just an Nitzachon of Chassidus, it's an Nitzachon to transform the world. So the Eibishter should help that the Futza Meinesecha Chutza Shein Chutza Memeno, that should lead to Lo Yirei V'Lo Yashchisu B'Chol Har Kochi Ki Mol Ha'oretz Deis Hashem Kamayim Layom Echasim. So Chassidus is the solution to Lo Yirei V'Lo Yashchisu. Melchom is Begashmius and Melchom is Beruchnius. We should already have Pada B'Shalom Nafshi Mamish Kipshute B'Shalom Davke, and the keiches of the Alter Rebbe and the keiches and the schus of this great day should give and protect the Eden Yisrael and Eden everywhere. Layonu v'leish, inu layonu v'leish Hashem Yisrael. Especially like the Rebbe would always say, Eretz Hashem Hashem Alekacha Bo Mereshes Hashem Ba'al Achri Shana. It should be recorded of Mamish. L'chaim, l'chaim. To switch it again. So, but how many mics are there? How many mics are there? Okay, thank you. Okay.
this and nice. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. We don't ever say that a Farbrengen ends, right? We only say we take a small break from one Farbrengen to the next. That's the Seder, right? So, just to conclude with our bracha, this is such a special day. It's Kislev, the day where it says that Chassidim celebrate. It's all the doors are open of all the brachas. Mulmaila. Frierdiker Rebbe says in the Sikha that when someone doesn't say Tachanun on Yud-Tes Kislev, even if he didn't say Tachanun the day before and the day after, Mamshech alle brachas. Mal gehört? Frierdiker Rebbe said that if someone doesn't say Tachanun Yud-Tes Kislev, even if he didn't say Yud-Tes or the Chav, but he didn't say Yud-Tes Kislev, is af alle brachas. Nee, er sagt, viel lieber sagt nicht nach ein ganzes Jahr. Yeah. Yeah. So, on this day, we have this all the brachas. We need it. And Eretz Yisrael, Machda Eretz Yisrael, here on our part, we're all warriors in this battle. By the Rebbe, every Milchama, the 6-day war, the Yom Kippur war, all the others, was never just Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe himself mobilized himself. All the Mivtzoyim were essentially direct outgrowths from these wars. Mivtze Tefillin, 6-day war. Mivtze Mezuzah, Malot. And then the other Mivtzoyim after the Yom Kippur war. And so the Rebbe turned everything that may have been negative into a positive. So we have all the direction we need. The Rebbe's call in Chav Zayin, he said, Hoye b'yem ahu yitaka b'shefer gadol. It's a shefer gadol today, unprecedented. Ask rabbis, Chabad houses, everywhere, Yidden are coming out of the woodwork, wanting to understand what it means to be a Yid, wanting to do a mitzvah. It's our job is to make sure we capitalize on this in the fullest sense of the word. And if we do our part, and we do it well, and with takeif, and not with compromises, like the Rebbe says, with Elech Eschem became Emiyas, with Gein Yankiv, we will prevail. So it should happen by Korav. The Eibishter should have Rachmanis on us already and bring the Geula Mitis Vashlema. It's enough 225 years of from the Alter Rebbe. It's the Hechste Zeit, as the Rebbe said. L'chaim, l'chaim, Yad Chassidim, Yad Yehudim, Al Aliena, Dedan Notzach, Am Yisrael, Chai, l'chaim, l'chaim.